One of our guests tonight wants to know if your beef really isn't more with, to say, the concept of original sin and universal depravity than it really is with religion in general, that you have a very specific view of what religion is, and that's what you have a problem with.
Well, yes, I mean, I think all religions are equally untrue, because I don't think there is a supernatural dimension to be appealed to, or to be used as an explainer of what we don't currently know about our species or about the cosmos. I think you get along much better if you exclude that assumption. And that means you don't empower, if you can exclude it, if you can limit it to a private belief, a belief people keep in their homes and so forth, which are, of course, more than entitled to do. It means you don't find that you're dealing with a class of witch doctors, mullahs, priests, rabbis, and others who make a living in politics by saying that they have special rights because they're doing God's will, which has been a curse to humanity throughout its entire existence. And currently, I think, in the form of theocracy and its various bullying threats, represents a very direct, immediate threat to the survival of our species. So yes, we'd be better off without it.
Would you like to respond to that, John?
Sorry, I missed the thing that I need to respond to.
Okay, well, that's all right. I guess
You mean we'd be better off without the doctrine of original sin?
Perhaps.
No, the question, John, was to say, obviously that wasn't my main objection. My main objection was to religion itself. And by the way, now you prompt me, I never said or meant to say that I attacked bad behavior that was undertaken or embarked upon in the name of, as you put it, religion. I think you were trying to be generous to me. I do insist that this kind of bad behavior is innate in religion, is part of religion itself. It's not an abuse of it or something undertaken in the name of. It's a direct consequence of the willingness to believe in the supernatural and the willingness to believe in a supernatural dictatorship in particular.
But I think that is the case in some situations, and it is the case with some people who've named the name of Christ. But what I notice here is this, that Christ forbade that kind of behavior. He told his followers not to take up the sword. Why? Because his kingdom was not of this world. So people who behave like that in the name of Christ aren't followers of Christ, they're disobeying him. And I would want to argue that as we look at his character and his attitude, this kind of evil behavior is not endemic to Christianity. It's endemic in caricatures and perversions of Christianity.
Okay.
That's too easy. I mean, for example, is it not written that I come not to bring a peace but a sword? Surely it is. Is it not written that those who won't follow me must depart and be cast into everlasting fire? Not a very gentle or pacific remark. Is it not said that if you don't give up your family, if you don't give up thrift, if you don't give up everyone who loves you and everything you love to sacrifice yourself for me, you're not worthy? These are strongly coercive and implicitly authoritarian or even totalitarian statements. And as C.S. Lewis rightly says, it's one of the very rare occasions where I agree with him, he said, you may not say that the preachments of Jesus of Nazareth are all right, even if you don't accept the religious basis of them. Lewis quite correctly says, if you don't accept that this man was the Son of God, you'll have to notice that many of his statements and sermons are either wicked or insane, or both. It's only on the belief that the world is very soon coming to an end, and that he himself has the right to claim a messianic role in this conclusion, that any of it can make any sort of sense at all. And everyone here knows at least some of the examples of what would be counted as wicked or insane if the messianic claims were found to be questionable, which they have been.
Okay.
I would want to question that very seriously because, as I said, Christ forbade the use of the literal sword. So when he said, I came not to bring peace and a sword, we can see exactly what that means by the fact that he has his message results in a division in society. That is, I've got the choice to decide for him or against him. and he will honor that choice whichever way it goes. The one sword he didn't come to bring was the physical sword, because when one of his disciples used it to cut the ear off somebody, Christ put the ear back on.
Okay. So they say.
Okay, well, the "so they say" comment may segue into the next question. This one's for Professor Lennox. One of our audience members wants to know, if you're correct about there being a deity, he wants to know, or she wants to know, why Jehovah? Why not Osiris? Why not Buddha? Why, in the words of one of our guests here, why is one myth or folk tale more true than another?
Well, first of all, I don't think they're all myths. I think there are many myths around in the world. And certainly the question is an important question, because it makes the distinction between the kind of deism or even theism that responds to the design in the universe and so on, and says, why this one God? My answer to that, ladies and gentlemen, is very simple. I have to decide that, like I decide everything else, on the basis of the evidence. And the evidence in the case of the life, death, resurrection of Jesus Christ has convinced me that he is God incarnate. So I base my faith on that evidence. And of course, each one of us must make up our own mind. Now, if we had time, I could explain that evidence in detail. But the point of the question is, how could we decide? We have to decide on the basis of evidence. Just as people who take the atheist view, they think the evidence points that way. And mercifully, we're still a free enough society that we can make these decisions. But we must make them personally.
Okay. Christopher, would you like to respond to that?
Well, you'll have noticed that there are many moments in the New Testament Gospels. One of them I'll take for a simple reason that it's easy to remember, that the Messiah will come to Jerusalem riding an ass or a donkey. But there are many others, including what town he'll be born in and so forth, where it says in the text, and this was done so that the prophecy should be fulfilled, that it should be done, because they knew what the prophecies were. A virgin will conceive, for example, is another one, though the word in Hebrew, alma, actually just means marriageable young woman, doesn't mean unpenetrated young female at all. But it's all reverse engineering. It says right there in the text, we're telling you this happened because that would mean that the prophecies had come true. So I think you might suspect a little, mightn't you, someone who's telling you literally as they're going along why they're telling you this, so that the conditions of prophecy fulfillment can be met. But there's a much graver problem even than that naivete, which is that these prophecies are of a Jewish Messiah to come. And the Jewish religious authorities of the time considered, and who were the nearest, much closer to being eyewitnesses, if the story is true at all, much closer than the authors of any of the Gospels. They were the people who were the religious authority in the area. He was a member, if he existed, of their congregation. They thought he was a sorcerer and a fraud and an impostor, and convicted him of blasphemy, because though he in fact never said that he was God, there are some Christians I know who do say that Jesus is God. There are some who say he only claimed to be the son of. The critical question is, he's asked, art thou the Christ? Are you the Messiah? And he gives a slightly evasive answer at this point, but it's enough to make the Sanhedrin rend its garments. So all you're seeing in this tale, if it be true at all, if it have any truth to it, is the origin of Jewish-Christian fratricide. Of the Jews who have nurtured the idea of prophecy and the Messiah through their prophets for generations, who believe the Messiah has not yet even considered deigning showing up, and those who tell the Jews, why are you wasting your time? The good news has already happened. Why did you just get with the program? I submit that neither of these propositions is worthy of the consideration of an intelligent or educated human being. It's Bronze Age peasant Palestinian superstition. And the competition over it and interpretations over it have made humanity's life even more miserable than it was going to be otherwise.
I know that Dr. Lennox has a response to that.
And in the third form of plagiarism that it takes, which is the plagiarism of Islam from both Judaism and Christianity, the competition between monotheism has become really outright menacing. And the real responsibility of citizens is to hold it down, is to resist theocratic bullying and the superstitions that underlie it.
Okay. I want to move on to another question, but I'll just give you just a few seconds to respond very briefly to that.
Well, if you're going to call it Bronze Age superstition, you'd be better to get it right. Because one of your statements there is just false. Jesus claimed to be God, and they stoned him. Why did they stone him? Because you, being a man, make yourself God. The notion that he never claimed to be God is simply false. And you say prophecy is irrelevant and superstition and all of that. One of the things that I find very interesting about the Christian faith is it's not a mere philosophy. It's geared into history. And when Jesus came, there were various things that were predicted. He fulfilled them. But the biggest of all was the fact that he fulfilled ideas that had been current in Israel for centuries, that someday there would become a person who would die for his people's sins. Now that is a huge thing, of course. And it seems to me that those prophecies, when they are fulfilled, provide part of the evidence that this thing is much bigger than some little local thing happening in Palestine, although it happened there, but is geared into a whole revelation through history itself. So I don't find it a product of Bronze Age superstition. They were not superstitious in any more sense. For example, when he mentioned the virginal conception of Christ, if I may just say a word about that, that when Joseph discovered that Mary was pregnant, he didn't suddenly believe in a miracle. He wanted to divorce her. Why? Because he knew exactly as we do where babies come from. He wasn't stupid, nor was he pre-scientific. And it took a lot of convincing for him to accept what I believe to be the true solution, that this was a unique miracle of God encoding himself into humanity.
So if your wife is pregnant and you know it's not you, the only alternative is that it's the Holy Spirit.
That's a false...
David Hume deals with this quite well. He says, in the case of the laws of nature being suspended, you have to ask yourself, have they been suspended in my favor, or am I possibly under a misapprehension? I think it's Thomas Paine who asks, which is more likely, that the laws of nature are suspended or that a Jewish girl should tell a fib? We have to grow up out of this stuff, you know. Now, your problem, Dr. Lennox, John, if I may say so,
yes,
is not with me. Your problem is with Monsignor Ronald Knox, one of the greatest Christian apologists, first an Anglican, then an Anglo-Catholic, then finally a Roman Catholic, who in his book of Apologetics very directly says Jesus of Nazareth never claimed to be God. It's not my problem. He claimed sometimes to be the Son, or let people run away with that idea. And to Jews, he was asked, when he was asked the direct question, are you the expected one, the awaited one, the one we want, the Messiah? He gave a slightly evasive, but they thought profane answer. Now, this is my account of this is correct, I'm sorry to say.
Okay, well
I regret to say.
I just hate to cut off a good conversation, but I'll give you one last...
Okay. Well, I'm fascinated that he quotes David Hume and talking about the suspension of nature. David Hume has got about the worst analysis of miracles I've ever read in my life. First of all, he didn't really believe in the law of cause and effect on which you base laws of nature. Secondly, the laws of nature are not suspended in a miracle. It's God feeds a new event in. If I put £100 plus £100 or $100 in my drawer tonight, 100 plus 100 is 200. If I find $50 in the drawer tomorrow, I don't say the laws of arithmetic have been broken, I say the laws of Alabama have been broken.
Okay. Okay.
But let me make the point from this. Wait a minute, I'm not finished.
Well, then you admit there is no conundrum.
There's
no problem to be solved in that case.
Yes, my knowledge
There's
of
nothing
the
to be
law.
explained.
There is. The knowledge.
Not if it's covered by the laws of Alabama, it isn't. Right.
But just a second. My knowledge that 1 plus 1 equals 2, I know that law, so to speak, tells me that another event has been fed into the system. And that's exactly what happens. My knowledge that dead men don't normally rise by observation means that if one does rise, not the laws of nature have been suspended or broken, but God, who created the universe and built into it those laws which are not causes but are descriptions of regularities, he's perfectly free, of course, as the creator, to feed a new event in, and then the laws of nature take over and a baby is born 9 months later.
Of course.
I think Hume is completely wrong about this.
Of course he's true.
I will let.
But then on that assumption, then there's nothing exceptional in. Do you believe that the sun stood still at midday so Joshua could complete his battle plan?
But I've just said.
Do you in fact believe that? I mean,
yes, that is how it was perceived. But let me go back to what you've just said. You've just said, Christopher. You have just said that there's nothing exceptional in it. There is something exceptional in it. But the claim that the laws of nature are suspended as if they cause things is not true. No. It's that God has done something very exceptional. He has fed an event in, and the way we recognize that is because we already know the regularities. If you didn't know the laws of nature, you could believe that everything was a miracle.
Okay, do you want me to do one more or not? An out-of-wedlock baby isn't something that requires a natural or supernatural explanation. It's its own explanation. The sun standing still at midday, or the daughter of Jairus being raised from the grave, or Lazarus being raised from the grave, neither of them with anything you notice to say for themselves about this event. The account in the Gospel of at the time of the crucifixion, all the graves of Jerusalem opening, and all the tenants of all the graves coming out and walking around the city and greeting people informally, rather suggesting that resurrection in the greater Jerusalem area wasn't that big a deal. If you're willing to believe any of this, that's the sort of thing you're willing to believe.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll move on to our next question. That was too good an exchange to interrupt. So this is for Mr. Hitchens, and again, we'll do a little bit of free play on this.
I bet we will.
Yes, we will. I imagine that's what most folks came to see.
I dare hazard that we will.
Now, are you willing to accept the view of Peter Singer that man has no ultimate dignity, meaning, hope, or value? If not, why not?
No, then the why not is problematic, of course, because there is, whether you are a materialist or a supernaturalist, no particular reason to say that human life has any enormous innate value. After all, religion disposes of people in heaps and mounds and says, go out, we depart into eternal fire, you're dust, you're nothing. If you don't have our faith, you're nothing less than nothing, you're worse, or evil, wicked, so forth. So it's not as if by assuming a God, you suddenly find that life is all worthwhile after all. If it was that simple, we wouldn't have to be having this discussion. I think this, essentially, I ask myself, why do I care? Why do I care not just about myself and my children, but why do I think I often care in general? Well, if I didn't, I wouldn't belong to a species that would have got this far. It may sound a platitudinous answer, but I think there's some force to it. If we didn't have human solidarity, if we didn't realize that we are brothers and sisters one with another, that we have responsibilities, duties to one another, that these are not merely reciprocal in evolutionary terms, in other words, you be nice to me, I'll look out for you, but that they can involve real ties, real bonds of affection, friendship, even love. If we didn't know that we were able to think like that, and we exempt quite a large minority of humans who are born without this, the sociopaths and psychopaths, who I suppose we have to concede are also made in God's image, if you accept that tautology, it leaves nothing really unexplained. That would tell us why we had warm feelings for one another, and also explain why we were here instead of having joined the species that went, all the other ones that went out of business, under the same divine supervision, I might add, including humanoid species like the Cro-Magnons and the Neanderthals, who it's quite clear buried each other with care and with love, looked out for one another, and so forth and so on, but somehow didn't make some divine grade. Do you see where I'm going with this? I do hope so.